I think when it comes to the Millennium Development Goals, they are comprehensive. They have been articulated with a great deal of care and after a lot of discussion among leaders of many countries. But I think the most important part of these goals is essentially to create an environment whereby development would take place and poverty can be eliminated. Now, this needs actions at various levels. Most importantly, you need understanding and knowledge at the grassroots level. Unfortunately, what happens typically with government departments, and I've seen that in my own experience as Director General of this institute, because we are doing a lot of grassroots projects, government departments generally function in silos and, in very narrow areas of concern, without realizing that, there's an overlap between different disciplines, between different activities. Development is not something that is confined only to, let's say, provision of water or fuels or all of these in a very discrete and disconnected manner. Development is something which requires integration. And that integration, unfortunately, doesn't take place. Now, this is where I think we need to make a difference. Let's take the case of protection of the environment. We know that the poor are highly dependent on ecosystem services. In other words, where do they get their water? Well, they don't often have piped supply, so they have to go to the nearest village pond or a river or stream. So they are totally dependent on nature's provision of water. When it comes to fodder for their cattle, where do they go? They have to go out in the forest, they'll have to cut grass, they may have to cut some leaves. All of that is also provided by nature. So as far as the poor are concerned, their lives are intimately linked with what nature gives them. And therefore, protection of nature is an essential part of removal of poverty. Unfortunately, environmental policies are only seen as the responsibility, let's say, of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. It is not seen as something that must be pervading the entire development scenario. Now, when you have a development project, there is no point in looking at an end-of-pipe solution. You have to look at it at the stage of design of the project itself. When you're designing a project, you've got to look at the environmental impacts and make sure that they are not harmful. Because if they are, then obviously it is going to affect somebody's life in a negative way. So I think we need a complete change in approach. I think what you really have to do is to create knowledge at every level of policy making and at every level of implementation, right down to the grassroots level, whereby people understand that you cannot function in silos. Development involves a whole range of factors and a whole range of indicators. Now, this can only be ensured, development can only be ensured provided you see that there is integration of all these actions. In my institute, TERI, we have come up with an approach called InStep. InStep stands for Integrating New and Sustainable Technologies for Elimination of Poverty. Now, you see, if you have, let's say, an intervention in agricultural technology and a separate intervention in energy technology, another intervention, let us say, in management of water, if you add all of this up, the benefits from it will be much less than if you carried out all these interventions on an integrated basis, which means the sum of the parts is much lower than the sum of doing all these things together. And I think this is where we have to now bring about an understanding, even when it comes to the Millennium Development Goals. We have each of these identified goals, but they actually overlap. They should come together. You cannot deal with them separately, and you need integration across the board. This is where I'm afraid both the international system and national governments have failed in bringing about proper integration across all the MDGs. So if we are serious about it, we are already in the year 2011. If we are serious about meeting the goals by 2015, I think it's essential for us to bring about a complete reorientation of the way these goals are being implemented. Let me just say one more thing. You know, we expected initially when the MDGs were formulated that there'll be large-scale development assistance which would make this possible. But unfortunately, that has not happened. You know, somehow development assistance is no longer in fashion. So what we can do through the MDGs is to see that national and local governments are sensitized to all these elements of poverty eradication. But they have to be sensitized in such a way that they allocate resources on an integrated basis. There's no point in allocating money for some programs in health, some in improvement of water quality, others in, let's say, forest protection. They have to be done in an integrated way. And you have to then also make sure that there's coordination between all the departments, all the agencies that are working together in this area. To my mind, that is the most important change that you must bring about in the implementation of the MDGs.
Why development assistance appears not to be in fashion any longer?
Well, there's a number of reasons. I think there are political reasons. In a number of countries, somehow there is a certain level of selfishness. People just believe that they have to consume more and more, and therefore their income is meant only for consumption. And I think in a number of countries, people are very insular. They feel they are living on an island. They don't realize that we are part of one society. If something goes wrong in one part of the world, then it affects everybody else. I'll give you an example. We've had these political problems in Tunisia, and I'm told there are lots of people from Tunisia who are getting on boats and going to Italy. See, we're living in a world where we are all residents of spaceship Earth. If something happens that is unfavorable in one part of the globe, it has unfavorable impacts on other parts of the globe. I think that desire to see that we must help our brothers, we must help other countries, even on the part of those countries which have benefited from colonialism, has now vanished. That feeling has vanished, unfortunately. So there's very little political support for development assistance programs. And may I say, there's also a lack of leadership. There are very few leaders who say, look, we have to help the countries which are poor. We have to help communities which are poor. And maybe this will change. I hope it changes. Because today the distinction between rich and poor is becoming larger. And to my mind, that's a dangerous situation. It's not healthy on any basis at all. When I had the privilege of accepting the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the IPCC, in my speech I used the term Vasudev Kutumbakam, which is Sanskrit for saying that this universe is one family. I think that feeling has vanished. People don't believe that we are living on the same planet. We are part of the same universe, and therefore we should be concerned by every element of this universe.